Father in heaven, we thank you so much for your love and for your grace. And we thank you for allowing us to see another new day. And we pray that as we spend this time together, that you will guide us, that you will instruct us and help us to have a fruitful time together so that we can be better prepared to lead in the area of family ministries. So we thank you, Father God. Place everything in your hands, work it out according to your purpose. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we're looking at conflict resolution. Now, as we go through, as usual,
recording in progress.
Please feel free to add your comments, ask your questions. I'm quite happy to take those as we go through. And then at the end, we may have more time for questions and answers. But yeah, please feel free to give your input as we go through. So looking at conflict resolution. So what are the learning outcomes for this session? We're going to understand, hopefully, the different conflict styles. We're going to look at the role that emotions play in maintaining conflicts, and then we're going to explore strategies for conflict resolution. And these principles are applicable across all manner of relationships, whether it's marriage, friendship, relationships at work, parental relationships. The methods that we use in order to address conflict are applicable across all of them. So, in every healthy relationship, conflict is natural, inevitable, even necessary for growth. Now, that last statement, even necessary for growth. Any thoughts on that? Do you agree with that? Disagree with that? Any observations? Is conflict necessary in order for relationships to grow? Any thoughts? Okay, no takers, so I'll press on. Here's the thing with relationships. There is a concept known as anti-fragile. There's a book written by a gentleman called, if I remember his name, Nicholas Taleb, and he advocates the concept of anti-fragile. And anti-fragile refers to systems that require stressors in order to grow and in order to thrive. So our bones, if we don't have heavy loads, load-bearing weight on our bones will deteriorate. If our muscles are not used, they will atrophy. So these are like systems that need stressors in order to develop. In a spiritual context, faith is anti-fragile in that if our faith is not tested, it cannot develop. And in that sense, relationships are also anti-fragile. Relationships grow through dealing with stressors. It's one of my favorite passages from Ellen White in the book Adventist Home. It's one which I insert in every wedding card that I sign. And she talks about a couple making Christ first and best and last in everything, to constantly behold him. And then as their relationship is submitted to the test of trial, then their relationship will grow stronger and closer. And so what she's saying there is that in order for couples to grow together, they have to negotiate challenges. So in that sense, I say that in order for a relationship to be a healthy relationship, there has to be this element of dealing with the stressors that enter into that relationship. So my position is that conflict is necessary for growth. It's neither good nor bad. It's about the way that we deal with the conflict. So I want to look at one particular tool for addressing conflict. It's called the Thomas Kilmann conflict styles. And it operates on an axiom between assertiveness and cooperativeness. And let me just put them out there. There is a competing style of dealing with conflict. There is collaborating. There is compromising. There is avoiding, and there is accommodating. Now let's break those down. It's important to remember, however, that none of these conflict styles are either right or wrong in and of themselves. The conflict style that we use needs to be appropriate for the situation that we're dealing with. So it may change from time to time. But what the Thomas Kilmann conflict styles assessment does, it indicates to people what their default way is of dealing with conflict. So you may have certain individuals who are naturally competing, others who may naturally be accommodating. And those individuals need to assess whether the style of conflict that they are using is appropriate for the relationship and appropriate for the situation that they are dealing with. So let's break these down. Competing. Competing is an assertive and uncooperative, power-oriented mode. When competing, an individual pursues his or her own concerns at the other person's expense. So when I reread this, the person that came to mind was Donald Trump. You know, Donald Trump is a very competitive individual. It's for him. It's a win-lose. I must win, and you have to lose. It's a very competitive, uncooperative style. So as I mentioned before, there are positives and negatives that go along with these different styles. So what are the positive, negative effects of a competing style? Well, you use it too often with people you care about. So if you're in a relationship that you care about and you want to nurture that relationship and you want people to feel safe within that relationship, then competing is not the best way to deal with the conflicts in that relationship. Another reason why it may be negative is that you want people to feel that they can discuss and disagree with you openly. Well, if that's the case, a competitive style, which can become aggressive, doesn't help people to feel safe. If people feel that every time they need to speak to you, they're going to get into a battle situation, they may be reticent to actually engage with you. So in these instances, a competing style is not necessarily the best way to go. Well, when is it positive? Well, you need something done quickly. You haven't got time to be messing about with different options. This needs to happen, and it needs to happen now. Competing style may be the way to go. Your conscience compels you to assert your case. So if people are asking you to do something that violates your personal standard, then you may need to just stand your ground. This is right, and I'm not shifting from that. So you know that you are right. Others need to see that. Competing style may be the way to go. Collaborating. Collaborating is both assertive and cooperative. When collaborating, an individual attempts to work with the other person to find a mutual solution. So here, when we talk about assertiveness means that you can state your case, stand your ground, but at the same time, you can be respectful to the other person. You are neither passive, where you don't share what you need to share, neither are you aggressive in trying to force the case, force your opinions on others. You just know what you believe in, you stand your ground, but you respect the other person at the same time. So, when is collaborating possibly negative? Well, you don't care that much about the issue. So if you don't care about the issue, Why are you wasting time negotiating? Just let whatever happens happens. If it's not an issue that affects you particularly, why waste time? You need to do something quickly. If there's a fire in the building and you need to get everybody out, that's not the time to be negotiating. It's everybody out. When is it positive? Well, when you have time and a desire to work the situation out. When you care about the person and the issue. So you're putting the person before the situation. You care about how they feel, how the outcome is going to impact them. You want to process feelings for future harmony. So with a collaborating style, it's more important to preserve the relationship than to be right. So even when you may be right about a situation, you don't feel the need to assert that because the relationship is more important. And in that kind of situation, though you may be right, if it's not an issue that pertains to your values and your standards, then just let it go in order to preserve the relationship. That might be a situation where collaborating is more ideal. Then there is compromising. So compromising is an intermediate style in both assertiveness and cooperativeness. So when compromising, the objective is to find an expedient, mutually acceptable solution that partially satisfies both parties. So it's about, you give some and you take some, and then we get to a place where, okay, this is the best that we're going to be able to do, so let's work with it. When is that negative? Well, when patients will get a better result. So sometimes people can compromise because they want things over and done with, and let's just move on. But if you have the patience to be able to sit with it, then you may get a better outcome. You violate a personal standard for an easy life. So as I was alluding to before, if you have a position that you know is right, and it's a position that represents your personal standards, your integrity, but then you violate that just for an easy life, just to get by, then you're not being true to yourself. When is it positive? Well, you need a quick solution and you are prepared to give something up in order to get a resolution. You want the same thing and it can be shared. So in these situations, compromising is a good way to go. Both parties cannot be satisfied, so neither of you are going to get everything that you want, but if you can get some of what you want, then okay, you can live with that. Avoiding. Now, avoiding is an unassertive and uncooperative style of relating and dealing with conflict. When avoiding, an individual does not immediately pursue either his or her own concerns or those of the other person. He or she does not address the conflict. Now, sometimes that might be a positive thing. Well, let's explore that. So, negative, you really want to deal with the conflicts in your life. You care about an issue but afraid to speak up. Or a problem keeps reoccurring. So with the avoiding style, there may be situations where it is wise to avoid. But if you have adopted a default of avoiding conflicts, avoiding situations that need to be addressed, but you avoid them simply for the easy life, you're storing up problems for yourself in the future. If you care about an issue, but you're afraid to speak up, that indicates a lack of assertiveness, and that is one of the most destructive dynamics in a relationship, when you're not prepared to say what needs to be said, because you're fearful about what the response is going to be. If a problem keeps occurring, that may be because you haven't addressed it, you know. So in those situations, avoiding is negative. Where it can be positive, again, you don't care about the issue that much. So why are you going to stress yourself out if it's an issue that really doesn't bother you that much? You or someone else is very angry and need time to cool off. We're going to come back to that later on in this presentation. But sometimes you need to back off to give yourself space and time to calm down and think through the best way to resolve a situation. Avoiding is good and necessary if you're in a dangerous situation. So if you're in a relationship where there is possible physical harm that can happen if the situation escalates, you may be in an abusive situation. And in those instances, avoiding may be the right way to deal with conflict so that it doesn't escalate out of control. So with that brief nearly missed one. Accommodating. So accommodating is unassertive and cooperative. The opposite of competing. When accommodating, an individual neglects his or her own concerns to satisfy the concerns of the other person. There is an element of self-sacrifice in this mode. So negatives of accommodating: happens a lot, and you wish you could speak up more often. So sometimes people accommodate simply to preserve the relationship. It's like, you know, what we mentioned before about compromising just for the easy life. You'll just go along with it. It leaves you resentful. So on the outside, you may say, oh, no, that's fine. But on the inside, you're stewing because you knew you should have spoken up. So in that sense, it can be negative. You are sacrificing what you want, again, just to avoid a difficult situation. Accommodating can be positive. You are or were wrong about something, or that's a situation. Hold your hands up, apologize, you know, and accommodate the opinion of the other person. You care more about the other person than you do about the issue. And again, that's a repetition. So here, you're not that bothered about the issue to the point that it's going to compromise the relationship that you have. So you can see with these various styles of dealing with conflict, they're neither right and they're neither wrong. It's about what's necessary in the situation. Now, you may have, as we have been going through, seen yourself in these situations. You may see yourself in different relationships and in different situations. But it's important to understand what your individual style of dealing with conflict is. So healthy conflict resolution depends on how we choose to handle our emotions. It is a basic fact of life that human beings generate emotions to different degrees. You know, you might even see somebody who looks like somebody that you don't like, and that can generate emotions within you. So in every relationship, at whatever level, we generate some level of emotion, and how we deal with the conflicts that arise is dependent upon how we handle our emotions. Proverbs 4 and verse 23 says, "Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life." So what Solomon is saying there is that the matters of the heart, how you deal with your emotions, can have a massive impact on your life outcomes. One of the problems, the major problems that we have when it comes to dealing with conflict is the concept of emotional hijacking. This is something that the author Daniel Goleman speaks about in his book, Emotional Intelligence. And emotional hijacking takes place when our emotional control center overrides the rational brain. So we have within our brains the emotional control center, which is called the amygdala. And the amygdala when we experience an alarming situation, the amygdala can kick in faster than the prefrontal cortex, where we do our processing. So emotional hijacking refers to the fact that adrenaline pours into our system to the extent that it impairs the proper functioning of the prefrontal cortex. And in those situations, we may say things or do things that we wouldn't ordinarily do if we were calm and in control of ourselves. So again, Solomon says, like a city whose walls are broken down is a man who lacks self-control. But what was the issue with a city whose walls were broken down? The issue was the city was vulnerable to attack. Same with individuals who cannot control their emotions. So you recall in the book of Genesis where God says or questions Cain, says, why are you angry? And then he says to him that sin is crouching at the door. It's not in there yet, but it's crouching at the door. Well, a lack of emotional control is one of the ways that we allow sin to come in through the door. So this is what Solomon means here, that we need to develop emotional control. We need to be able to regulate our emotions so that we don't make ourselves vulnerable to the attack of the enemy. So the amygdala that I just mentioned, the emotional control center of the brain, functions like an alarm system. And when the alarm system is set off and that adrenaline flooding creates that fight and flight response, we react quicker than we process. So if you're, for example, walking down the road and you see something on the ground that looks thin and slithery, and your amygdala immediately fires off because you think there's a snake in front of you. And you react, you jump out of the way, but then you take a closer look and you see that it's a rubber hose, then the adrenaline kick just subsides and begins to process out of your system, because now your prefrontal cortex has kicked in, told you that you're not in danger, and so now the body can kind of calm down. But the amygdala, the flight or fight response, kicks in quicker than our cognitive process. And it's in that space of time that we can say things and do things that can escalate conflicts to a unhealthy degree. Aristotle says this: anyone can get angry. That's easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that's not so easy. And isn't that the case? Getting easy is so easy. But getting angry is so easy that we can be irritable because we're tired or because we're stressed. That's not a problem. But can we channel that anger? Can we regulate that anger? Because anger in and of itself is not a problem. Bible says, be angry and do not sin. But it's whether or not we can control that anger. Solomon again: fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end. When I read that, I recall an incident on the motorway that left me in a traffic jam, where a guy chased another guy for 4 junctions on the motorway because he cut him up, and then pulled in front of him, slammed down his brakes. The first guy managed to avoid the accident, but then that caused a pileup behind him. 4 junctions on the motorway, and all that while he's angry. So some time along that way, something should have said, "This is not wise. Just calm down." So the Bible tells us that we need to control our emotions, including rage and anger. John Gottman, who is a phenomenal researcher and writer in the area of family life and what makes family relationships work, marriages, parenting. He also does a lot on abuse within the family, physical abuse, domestic abuse. And he coined the concept of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. He draws that analogy from the Bible, and he uses them in regard to criticism. And criticism focuses on the person rather than the issue. And it is easy to turn what is a legitimate criticism into a negative criticism. So if I ask you to do something and you don't do it, I can hold you accountable and say, well, I asked you to do such and such for me and you agreed, but you didn't do it. That's a legitimate complaint. Now, if I want to turn that into a negative criticism, I just have to tag on to the end of that. What's wrong with you? Because now I've switched it from the situation to you as an individual. So criticism focuses on the person rather than the issue. Then there is contempt. Contempt has been described as the sulfuric acid of relationships. Contempt is when you look at another person as if they are lower than you. You're looking down your nose at them. That's contempt. Defensiveness, and that's a way of counter-complaining. So I say, well, I asked you to do such and such the other day, and you didn't do it. And then you come back and say, well, I asked you to do da-da-da, and you didn't da-da-da-da. So it's like playing tennis. You're counter-complaining. And then the 4th one is stonewalling. Stonewalling is when there is complete shutdown of communication. You know, it's like you're speaking to a brick wall. And all of these dynamics in conflict resolution are ways of avoiding responsibility. They're ways of shifting responsibility away from yourself onto another person or another thing. Now, it's not a great problem if every once in a while you utilize one of these 4 horsemen. You know, that's just a natural part of relationships. But relationships die when the 4 horsemen become the default way of operating in our relationships. When those 4 horsemen are galloping through our relationship unchecked, then relationships will eventually die. So emotional regulation is a vital component of emotional intelligence. Now, people with low emotional intelligence are managed by their emotions rather than controlling their emotions. So what is emotional intelligence? You can recognize and identify your emotions. You can manage your feelings. There's no, if I can recognize that I have an issue with rage, but the recognition of my problem with rage is no good to me unless I can control my rage. So you can recognize and identify, but then you can manage your feelings. That's about relating to ourselves. The second aspect of emotional intelligence is how we then relate to other people. So you are sensitive to other people's emotions. And we can probably think of people who are not. They say what they want, how they want, you know, and they justify it by saying, well, I'm just telling the truth. But the Bible says speaking the truth in love. Speaking the truth is not enough. We need to do it with the right motivation. with the right tone, with love. And you can manage your relationships effectively. Because, so if I know that the way that I speak to you is going to adversely impact you, then I can modify the way I speak so that I can achieve a positive purpose. So emotional regulation, which is a facet of emotional intelligence, is absolutely vital for conflict resolution, for healthy conflict resolution. Because in conflict resolution, a lot of the times, it's not about the issue. It's about how you chose to relate to me. It's about how you made me feel. So how do we use our emotions? Well, one, identify the emotion that you are experiencing. So if you get in a conflict situation and it begins to spiral, and you take the time to stop and think, well, what am I feeling here? Well, what is the root of my emotion? And it's not always an easy thing to identify. For example, if you get angry with somebody, anger is what is known as a secondary emotion. And if there is a secondary emotion, that indicates that there is a primary emotion. But the primary emotion tends to be masked, covered up by the intensity of the secondary emotion. So I know that I'm angry. The question is, why am I angry? The anger is like the tip of the iceberg. The reason for the anger is under the surface. And that might be, you might feel hurt. You might feel rejected. You might feel abandoned. You might feel disrespected. It's important to get to the root that underpins the anger, because that's where the work really takes place. So identify the emotion that you are experiencing. And then secondly, work out the message that that emotion is giving you. So that again pertains to what I just explained. Why is it that I'm angry? When we get angry, it is because some standard that we have has been violated, whatever that standard may be. Now, it's sometimes the standard is a valid one, sometimes it's not a valid standard. If somebody cuts me up on the road and I get angry, what's the standard? The standard is that people should treat me with respect. Okay, is that a valid standard? Can be. But then think about it. Do you own the road? No, you don't own the road. Is your anger justified? So work out, what is the message? And if you do that exploration of what is going on below the surface, you may identify, well, I'm feeling hurt. Well, I'm feeling disrespected. That's what you need to address. Not just the fact, oh, you made me angry. No, I'm hurt here. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling fearful here. When we get to the root emotions, that's where we can really begin to bring about resolution. So work out the message that the emotion is giving you. Ask yourself, how can you use the emotion? So if the emotion is sadness, sadness usually indicates that something has happened that you didn't expect, or has contravened some plans that you have, or you've lost something that is significant to you, and sadness can indicate that you need to take some time out just to heal your wounds. Be quiet for a while. Do something in order to address the pain that you're experiencing. If it's anger that you are experiencing, how can you use anger in a positive way? Well, anger can be a motivator. If you see, for example, images of people starving in some part of the world, you can get angry at that. But if you then throw the remote control at the television in order to express your anger, that's not a positive use of anger. But if you use that anger to influence you to go and, make a donation or join a group that can assist, that's more of a positive use of the anger that you are experiencing. So how can you use the emotion that you are experiencing? Then identify what you need to change. Do I need to change my perspective? Do I need to change my behavior? Maybe you're in a relationship and you had certain expectations of that person in that relationship, and they have violated your trust to a point where you can no longer trust them. Well, what do you need to change? Maybe you need to change how much you actually divulge to them. Maybe you need to put some boundaries in place in your relationship. Maybe you need to change your perspective. You saw them as a 100% trustworthy person, but now you know better. So you need to change the way that you relate to them. Maybe you need to put distance between you and that person. So identify what you need to change in order to address that emotion that you are experiencing, and then take action to change your life. Now, you can apply this principle to any emotion that you are experiencing. In our closest relationships, we don't always have the same kind of options that we have in relationships that are not so close. If somebody shouts at you in the street, you got the option of going about your business. You'll probably never see this person again in your life. So why let it bother you? But if it's a close relationship, you're invested in that relationship. You're not only looking to resolve that situation, but you're looking to preserve the relationship long term. So we need to do the work that's necessary in order to get where we want to in our relationships. So conflict resolution involves skills that can be learned if there is a willingness to develop a healthy relationship. Romans 12, live in harmony with one another, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So Paul is acknowledging here that there are certain things that we're in control of. We are in control of what we say. We are in control of what we do. We are not in control of how other people choose to relate to us. We can't control the words that they speak. We control our reaction to how they react to us. Jesus says in the Gospels, sometimes, you have to wipe the dust off your feet and move on. So we have to appreciate that when it comes to conflict resolution, sometimes the way to resolve it is to separate. Just go about your business. Leave them to believe what they want to believe, do what they want to do. You can't change them. It's not within your power to bring about reconciliation. And sometimes that's a hard reality that we need to accept, but it is a reality. So, conflicts are maintained and aggravated by the way couples choose to solve them. There is a misconception that if you fall into quicksand, what you need to do is to fight your way to get out of it. But here's the problem. When you fall into quicksand, the more you fight, the quicker you'll sink. So one of the first things that folks who know about these things say is that when you fall into quicksand, stop moving. Stop moving. And it feels counterintuitive. But the way we are trying to solve the problem is actually making the problem worse. So stop struggling. Solomon says, a harsh word stirs up anger. So when we're in the midst of the situation, we may feel that, I've got to say this. But if saying that is going to escalate the situation, it's going to exacerbate the problem, then why say it? Choose a different way to solve the problem. What tends to happen is that unsuccessful attempts to fix a problem often result in the fixer escalating their efforts. So an example would be, you have one person who is a stonewaller, another person who are trying to deal with the situation, and the one who is trying to start the conversation or initiate engagement is being blocked by the stonewaller. And so the other person will escalate. They will raise their voice, and the stonewaller gets up and walks out the room, and the other person follows them into the room and continues. Maybe that's not the best way to try and deal with the situation. So we need to think about, what is the most effective way to communicate what I want to communicate in order to get to where we want to get. It is said that you can be right at the top of your voice. So you may be the right one on the issue, but if that means that you're going to destroy the relationship by the way that you are relating, well, you both the loser in the end. Interactions in relationships tend to be habits or repetitious patterns, patterns that they develop over time. So if we think about the conflicts that we have in our closest relationships and how those conflicts develop, oftentimes we will see patterns. One of the things in working with couples in crisis, one of the exercises that we ask couples to do is to think about their problem and imagine that your favorite actor or actress is going to play you in a movie, and you are the consultant who will give them instructions of how to play you in that movie. What would you tell them about how you deal with conflicts in your life? And it's a helpful exercise because it gets people to stop and process and think through the dynamics of how their conflicts play out over time. And oftentimes it's just a repetition of the habits that we have developed, habits that need to be broken. But here's the thing. If what you are doing isn't working, do something different. Now that may sound so simple, it's not rocket science, but if what you're doing is not working, do something else. We know that we're familiar with the saying that says that the madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, insanity. So we need to look at different ways of dealing with our situations. Proverbs 15:28 says, "The heart of the righteous studies how to answer." So think through, what is the best way to address this situation? So change the doing of the problem. The question is, how many people does it take to change a relationship? Now, I've done a lot of talking. Let me throw this out and see if anybody wants to respond. How many people does it take to change a relationship? Anybody? One. Any advances on one? Anybody want to challenge that? All right, well, let's go with that. One. Yeah, absolutely. It's one. It only takes one person to change a relationship. Now, the question was not how many people does it take to have a healthy relationship. In that case, the answer might be different. But to change the relationship, it only takes one. Why? Because if you think about got a couple there who are dancing, and imagine that one is dancing, they're both dancing the tango, but then the other one decides in mid-dance to start doing the foxtrot. What's going to happen to the dance? Mess. The dance is going to stop. And in order for them to be in harmony again, either one will have to go back to doing the tango, or the tango will need to change to do the foxtrot. But the reality is, when one person makes a decision to change, it changes the dynamic of the relationship. So if you're in a relationship where there's constant conflict, you're conflicted, you have the option to change the dynamic of that relationship. It does not guarantee that the other person is going to respond in a healthy way, but the relationship is going to change. So, for example, if you have folks who are in a relationship where one person has been in control and they are emotionally coercive, and everything is done the way they want to do it, and the other person has been passive and they never speak up for themselves. But one day that individual who is passive decides, you know what, I'm going to take back my personhood. I'm going to assert myself. And they begin to do so. They speak up for themselves. The other person doesn't like it, and so they resist. Well, if that passive individual who is now decided to be assertive continues to be assertive, the other person has a choice to make. Either they will change to accommodate the assertiveness of what was the passive person, or they will continue to resist or go their separate ways and find somebody else with whom they can be coercive. Either way, the relationship is going to change. So the upshot of this is that we have the power to change our relationships. We don't have the power to guarantee the outcome of the changes that we make. Viktor Frankl, who was a prisoner during World War II, said this in addressing the situation in the prisoner of war camps where the Jews had very little agency. He said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Because that's what we have control of. So 6 questions to discover a problem pattern. How often does the problem typically happen? What is the usual timing? When does the problem usually happen? How long does the problem typically last? Where does the problem typically happen? What do you do when the problem is happening? What do others who are around you when the problem is happening usually do or say? And this is just about being analytical. You know, you're picking this situation apart so you can understand what the dynamics are. Because once you've answered these questions and questions like them, you're in a better position to do something about it. Because you know specifically what the dynamic is, you can then change that dynamic. And while it's in my head, one of the important things to do, especially in our closest relationships, is that when we are not in the conflict, that is the time to have a conversation about how you want to operate when you are in the conflict. Because once you're in the conflict, emotions are running high. That's not the time you don't have the head to say, hang on a minute, this is what I want you to do. So no, in those quiet moments, sometime after the conflict, where you're not going to reignite the issue, talk about what happened, how it happened, how you would like things to happen in the future. So conflicts in relationships are often the result of boundary violations, whether that is physical, but the violation of physical boundaries, pushing and shoving, mental boundaries, messing with people's minds, gaslighting, emotional boundaries, guilt tripping people, spiritual boundaries, where we can be spiritually abusive. If you don't do such and such, God doesn't like you, or statements like that. All of these represent boundary violations, which can give rise to conflict. And boundaries is simply what's okay and what's not okay. So within all of our relationships, it's important for us not only to know what our expectations are, but also to communicate those expectations and then to speak up when those boundaries are violated. So, how do we deal with conflict? Soften your startup. The way we begin our outcomes will often determine how they continue. So I mentioned before that we stimulate emotions between us. So if, say, a husband has been asked to do something and he doesn't do it, and the wife comes in and she says, well, I asked you to do something. What's wrong? If you start at that level, how you have begun that interaction will very often cause the other person to react to the way that you've started that conversation. It sets up an adversarial, contentious situation. Whereas if that wife came in and said, well, I asked you to do such and such, and it hasn't happened, well, what? Because they've started in a more conciliatory way or calmer way, they will probably get a different response. Bible says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. Again, we generate emotions between us. The heart of the righteous studies how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours forth evil. So think about how you're going to start. If you know there's a situation that you need to raise, think about how you're going to do that. Think about when you're going to do that. Is the last thing at night when you've just gone to bed and you're tired, is that the best time to really start a conversation about a conflict issue? So give it some thought about when is the best time to actually address this. So here is a cycle of negative conflict. Harsh startup can lead to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling, and that can lead to the fight or flight response. And when we experience that, we can put emotional distance between ourselves, and that can fracture our relationships. So how do we deal with conflict? Soften your startup and then make repair attempts. So what are repair attempts? Any statement or action that is designed to prevent negativity from escalating in order to reestablish healthy communication. So conflict arises. What do you do to de-escalate? What do you do to calm that situation? Anything that you do, that constitutes a repair attempt. And it can be anything. It can be simply saying sorry. It can even be, as one couple did, they, pull a funny face. You're arguing back and forth, and all of a sudden you just pull a funny face, and that kind of takes the steam out of the situation. That's a repair attempt. So anything that we do to reestablish connection. Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons or the children of God. Repair attempts work best when we have created an environment of positivity. So John Gottman in his research talks about the magic ratio. And the magic ratio is how many negative interactions we have to positive interactions. And he says that in a healthy relationship, you need at least 5 positive interactions to counter 1 negative interaction. And he actually says that in the happiest of marriages, which is the context in which he was speaking, he says that the ratio is around 25-1. Now, when that's the case, when there is 1 negative interaction within the context of 25 positive interactions, the individual can deal with the 1 because of the 25. But when the 1 is met by for every negative interaction, there are only maybe a couple of positive ones, that erodes the sense of safety, the sense of well-being within that relationship, because we naturally focus on negative more than positive. If you do a presentation and 99 people tell you it's a great presentation and 1 person tells you, no, that stunk, our minds will tend to fixate on the negative one if we are not comfortable in ourselves. So yeah, create that atmosphere of positivity, praise, affirmation, encouragement. If you think about Peter's experience with Jesus, when Jesus said to him, "Get thee behind me, Satan," I'm sure that would have hurt Peter, but Peter could handle it because of the overall relationship of positivity that he had with Jesus. So, in conflict, little changes matter. A 1 degree, a minor change, can make a major difference in the trajectory of a relationship. So if you think about 1 degree in terms of sending a rocket to the moon, for example, 1 degree over a distance of 100 yards, you won't notice any difference. But over the distance of thousands and thousands of miles, that rocket will be way off target through a 1 degree change. Well, a 1 degree shift back in the direction of where we want to be, over time, it will make a massive difference. The change process does not have to be complicated and arduous. Remaining calm during a conflict is key. And for that, it's important to become aware of what's happening in your physical body. So, for example, how do you physically experience anger? For me, I get tight in my chest. For other people, they may get tight in their neck. The shoulders may become tight. For some people, they get hot under the collar. Other people may get headaches. Other people's hands may tremble. It's important for us to realize or to understand how we physically experience emotions, because that then gives us a warning. It says a trigger. When we notice that we're starting to feel it in a certain way, we can put the brakes on and say, hang on a minute. There's something going on here. I'm not feeling quite right. Well, why am I feeling this way? Because there's this close relationship between our emotions and our bodies. Ellen White says, when one is affected, the other sympathizes. You get nervous, you feel it in your stomach. You're happy, we laugh. When we're sad, we cry. The physicality and the emotions are very closely connected. So we need to understand, be aware of what's happening in our physical body. This is a point I mentioned a little earlier. Talk about how you prefer to do conflict when you are not in conflict, when you are calm. You might work out a signal between you that if you get to a certain point and you are feeling that this is escalating out of control, time out, or some kind of signal to say, okay, we need to stop at this point and revisit this when we're in a better emotional state. Hebrews 12 verse 14, make every effort to live in peace with all men and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. So see the bigger picture in terms of building our preserving our relationships with one another. And again, it alludes to what I just said. Learn how to call the time out. Step back from the situation so you can calm down. Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before dispute breaks out. So yeah, sometimes just walk away. Walk away. And bear in mind that when you experience that adrenaline flooding that I mentioned before, that John Gottman calls diffuse physiological arousal, when you experience that fight or flight, it takes about 20 minutes for our bodies to calm down. So don't re-engage with that conversation before your body has had that chance to calm down. Go take a walk, listen to some music, pray about it, do whatever you need to do in order to calm down before re-engaging. Conflict resolution requires that we master the art of forgiveness. And what is that? Well, here's my working definition. It is a choice I make to allow God to remove destructive emotions from my heart, enabling me to heal and giving me the capacity for reconciliation through the power of His Spirit. So it requires only one person to forgive, two or more to reconcile. But again, we are not in control of what the other person does. Reconciliation should only take place when it is safe to do so, and when the terms of the relationship, how you're moving forward, when that has been agreed and you're okay with that, then it's okay to reconcile. Ephesians 4, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God in Christ forgave you. Until we can accept each other's flaws, we will not be able to collaborate successfully. Understand that we are not perfect, so do not expect perfection of the other person. Accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. Matthew 7 verse 3, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? In other words, deal with your own situation first. And the tendency is that when we do deal with our own situation, when we appreciate how we are contributing to the situation, it can make us more gracious in our response to the other person's contribution. All right, let's begin to wind up. Philippians 2 and verse 3 says this: let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. So that doesn't mean that we don't think about ourselves and we don't neglect our own needs. It means that we need to, again, think about how important the relationship is and do we need to preserve it. The inability to resolve a problem does not have to destroy a relationship if there is a willingness to accommodate differences in each other. Overcoming gridlock. There are two types of marital conflict: solvable problems and unsolvable problems. Our issue is that we spend too much time on the unsolvable issues rather than focusing on what we can actually change. So sometimes those unsolvable problems might be things like the other person's personality type. That's not going to change. It is what it is. And if that's rubbing you up the wrong way, then you need to learn how to accommodate that. We can deal with behavior, but we can't change people's personality. Listen not only to words, but listen to the heart for unspoken fears, concerns, moods, and aspirations. What's the story? That's another case of looking below the surface. When we say things like, you know, you make me so mad. What's below that? Where when people say things like you are so irresponsible, what's the message behind that? It might be that, you know, I'm frightened for you. You're never around. Well, the actual message might be I miss you. So find out what the story is underneath the externals. Where resolution is difficult to achieve, bringing in an independent third party can be a helpful thing to do. If I have a problem with my washing machine, I don't know how to fix washing machines. I'll go to somebody who knows how to do that. So sometimes consulting with somebody who can give a third perspective can be a helpful thing to do. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And in closing, Paul says in Philippians 4 and verse 8, finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence, and if anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on these things. Okay. We're done. Any questions or observations before we take a break in preparation for our next session? Any questions or observations? And there was silence about the space of half an hour.
Jesus ain't coming back yet. Not yet. Thank you very much for that. I like the way you put that there. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Very eye-opening. I wasn't here at the beginning, but I was just wondering.
Yeah.
You mentioned about how that when a person is angry, that it takes the person like 20 minutes to calm down.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself that oftentimes young people, children, do get to the stage where they're so boiled up